Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte
not closing any doors on possible sanctions against Vladimir Putin. I want to bring Congressman Eric Swalwell in. He's a California Democrat who is a member of the Intelligence Committee. Good evening, Congressman. Thanks for joining us. The expulsion of 60 Russian diplomats from Russia comes just after the Trump administration slapped sanctions against Moscow for its election intrusion. You have been very critical of this president and the White House. Do you give them any credit for these moves?
I do, Don. Good evening. He deserves credit for what he did today, and it's what any American president who wanted to protect our ballot box and our democracy would do. But Don, what the president should do is to declare to the country what our strategy with Russia is and what we will do to achieve that strategy. I would suggest that the strategy should be to counter Russian aggression here and abroad, and to carry it out, he should directly confront Vladimir Putin. He should ratchet up the sanctions. He should use the resources we have in the United States to give the ballot boxes in our counties all the protection they need to stop further Russian aggression. And he should support an independent commission to tell the country what happened in the last election and what we're going to do to make sure it never happens again.
So, Representative, the Russian ambassador responded to the expulsion saying the United States did very bad step, undercutting a little what we still have in Russian-American relations. These decisions are going against to the telephone conversation between our two presidents. The question is the ambassador making a distinction between the words of this president and the policies of the administration?
Well, certainly, Don, what's been frustrating is that you see, on one hand, the policies either from Nikki Haley or former Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, who have been rather harsh on Russia, and then you see the president. So if the president is not willing to directly confront them, it's confusing to the Russians and our allies as to what exactly we're going to do. Now, the president says over and over and over, wouldn't it be great if we could just get along with Russia? Well, sure, but only if getting along with Russia accomplishes something that helps our security and the security of our allies. And the president has yet to declare that, and I think now is an opportunity to tell people what the strategy is and what we're going to do to achieve it.
Well, the White House is adding two senior staffers who have been outspoken critics of Russia. CIA Director Mike Pompeo stepping into the Secretary of State role, and John Bolton as a national security advisor. Are you encouraged by any of this?
Well, I have worked with Mike Pompeo on the Intelligence Committee. He served our country in the military. I look forward to his confirmation hearing and some of the questions he faces. But Don, let me say this. He was somebody who said publicly that Russia's interference did not affect the outcome of the campaign, which was not true, and the CIA had to clear up. And then John Bolton is somebody who had been quite harsh throughout his career on Russia, but just recently has been supporting the NRA efforts over in Russia. And so you have to wonder, are these individuals, are they following the lead of Donald Trump, just as Jeff Sessions, right, who was a longtime Cold Warrior, and then all of a sudden joins the Trump campaign, has taken all these meetings with the Russian ambassador, and then failing to tell the Senate during his confirmation that it occurred. So will Donald Trump bend them, or will they stand firm for what they've always believed?
There have been reports that a number of lawyers are turning down joining the president's legal team. The president has disputed that on Twitter Those are the tweets that he put up saying, that everybody wanted to be a lawyer, in essence. What impact do you think that this will have on the Russia investigation?
Well, Don, Clarence Darrow could not save this client, the President of the United States. The problem here is not the lawyers. It's a flawed, very exposed client who rarely has ever met the truth. And so he should best just come clean. The best thing he could do would be to come clean with the American people, put himself in the witness chair and answer the questions of the special counsel, and allow Bob Mueller to tell the world what Donald Trump's role was in the last interference campaign. But I think Bob Mueller is going to proceed and move forward whether Donald Trump has a high-profile lawyer or not.
And he seems to only have one lawyer there now representing him, one officially, and that's Jay Sekulow. I mean, how, if it comes down to that, Jay Sekulow up against Mueller and an entire team, that it appears that it doesn't bode well for the president.
And I also, again, Don, would say that no lawyer can save somebody who has had a hard time throughout his career and being forthright and telling the truth. And what Donald Trump, I believe, is exposed to is that he has had a long-standing relationship with the Russians financially, that he invited them to hack Hillary Clinton's emails, and then once they did that, he cheerleaded the hacking of those emails, and he, I would say, emboldened further hacking by not denouncing them, and then, of course, has continued to look the other way on what Russia's done in the world, and has obstructed the investigation by firing James Comey, Sally Yates, and most recently, Andy McCabe. So there's a lot of exposure there, and he can save himself, I think, by just coming clean with the American people.
It is Tuesday, the 27th of March of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, because, hey, that's what we do here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The daily specials, I have to assure you, are not just leftovers that we're trying to get rid of, like most daily specials are. Our daily specials are especially special because they're for you. Yes, indeed. Well, that was Representative Swalwell showing and explaining how much Russian exposure Trump really has. And there's one way, only one way that he can save himself. And indeed, that's come clean with the American people. But Trump can't do that because he's a mobster. Mobsters don't admit mistakes. They don't. That's part of their MO. So it is. Actually, we're going to attend to that aspect of Trump. And I'll bring that up a little bit later when we do the rundown on what we have curated for you today. Well, so much news, of course. The affluenza team is going to be released. They're going to apparently put some major restrictions on them. No alcohol. Limit on driving. Pretty much the same restrictions he had when he drove drunk and killed his friends and classmates. So much for that. And the kids from Parkland, or the student movement, I should describe it that way, actually, continue to be attacked in the most vile way. I usually use Facebook for family and friends. Actually, I should get rid of Facebook. I just trying to turn off the notification aspect. I mean, what the hell? I need to get an IT guy to help me on that one, I guess. But I've only recently, put up some overt political things on Facebook. I usually save that for Twitter. But I don't understand people that want to go after these kids. And they're so addicted to the idea of a gun that they make all these stupid excuses. It's everything else except their own addiction that is driving this. The problem with Facebook is that that's the other thing. I didn't really keep it down private for family and friends. I put it out as public so that I can, because what I was doing is I was using Facebook as another platform to, put things out about Netroots Radio and the show and all of that. But is it really worth it? I don't know anymore. But what I meant to say is that there's a few people in town who take exception to my proclamations about these kids. And since it's really close at home, and I live in a very gun-oriented town, okay? I mean, this is, people, they walk around with big old things strapped to their hips. They carry long rifles, assault rifles, it's, I don't know. Do you get into a political debate with someone like that? Especially when you consider the possibility that their brains are addled by some sort of pharmaceutical or a stimulant they got from the truck driver driving through? I don't know. Kind of makes me think that whoever is suppressing free speech is the one who has the gun. But regardless, it's so endemic. I live in a really small town, but Rogue River has a pharmacy, and it's like a general store, but it's Rogue River Pharmacy, and they sell guns and they sell drugs. Guns and drugs. And of course, it's supposed to be tongue-in-cheek, but I think it's a mirror to the soul. And addiction is a terrible thing. I must confess that I don't think I've ever been addicted to anything. I've never had to wean myself off of anything. That's not to say I haven't experimented with all sorts of things like candy. Candy can be pretty addictive. We were restricted on television growing up, so when I got into college, I kind of caught up on all, the TV that I had missed and, the almost 2 decades previous. That's not to say we were totally devoid of television, but we were restricted, so one could say that in the binging to catch up, no, even that, because I don't really watch that much TV, love film. Let's see, never smoked cigarettes. But I have experimented with a lot of different types of behaviors, and fortunately I never did anything where it became addictive. But I've been around a lot of addicts who have been addicted to many, many different things, whether it be television, alcohol, drugs, candy, whatever, right? We know the addictive personalities. And they all have pretty much the same rhetoric and the same defense mechanism when, defending their addiction and blaming everything else and never once admitting, I don't know. So, I'm still coming off of this cold or whatever it is that my mom and I caught over the weekend, and she seems to be doing a little bit better too, thankfully. Well, okay, so on the rest of the menu, this just came in. The UK Parliament demands Mark Zuckerberg's testimony after the Facebook boss offers to send a deputy instead. He goes and meets with the Russians personally, but he always sends someone else to, testify in front of Congress or the UK Parliament. He doesn't go to France. I don't think he's ever testified in front of in Germany either. So, but he sends deputies. Being Trump's stooge could come back to haunt Devin Nunes in a big way, and it couldn't happen to a more loathsome creature. And, did you know this? You probably do, but I'm going to remind you. 2/3 of all Americans live in the Constitution-free zone. That's right. You don't have any rights. Well, you have some, but, they can be usurped on a whim. After the break, we'll move from the Bistro Cafe to the chef's table to investigate a new report that details just how rigged the midterms are in favor of the Republicans. And now they're going to put in a citizenship question on the census, which will totally blow up the census and make it invalid. Thank you very much. Fortunately, Holder, Obama, and the rest of Holder's law firm or crew are going to litigate this question being put in, the citizenship question put in the census. It totally invalidates it. And ignored amidst all of his other scandals, Trump's mob ties are as deep as they are unprecedented. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. you go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you'll notice on the rightish of the page there at the bottom is our chat room link, and our Roaring Girl, Kelly Lincoln, monitors that. So if you have any concerns, questions, requests, etc., that's the one way to contact us. If you look to the leftish of the chat room link there at the bottom of our homepage, you'll notice the Contribute Donate buttons, and that is an integral part of our homepage because we are unable to do any of this without you, and your generosity helps us pay the bills, and thank you for that. Follow us on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Go to Facebook if you still want to. We're there. And I'm on Twitter at Justice Putnam, and I also post a show notes and links diary every day about 10 minutes before showtime on Daily Kos. So I'm on Daily Kos as Justice Putnam. And guess what? Podcasts of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy can be had by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, Stitcher. Oh, and guess what? iTunes. I am now on the iTunes registry for your listening convenience. Okay, we better get into these articles here that we have curated for you, and because time's a flying. Okay, Agence France Presse penned this first one, and of course they have worker bees, and they don't name who writes these stories. Come on, Agence France Presse. British MPs renewed a demand on Tuesday to interview Facebook chief Mark Zuckerberg personally over a data privacy row. After he responded to an earlier request by offering to send one of his deputies. I don't know. Maybe don't request. Tell. Damian Collins, the chairman of the House of Commons Digital, Culture and Media Committee, said that the seriousness of the allegations meant it was appropriate for Zuckerberg to offer an explanation himself, whether in person or via video link. I don't know. He's got enough money to make it over there to London. Come on, Mark. You know, Wiley is sitting in front of, has been sitting in front of Parliament. He may be done now, but he was giving testimony today. So I don't know. He somehow found a way to get over there. In a letter published to the committee, or by the committee yesterday, a senior British Facebook executive offered to send Chief Technology Officer Mike Schroeper or Chief Product Officer Chris Cox to London next month. Yeah, send the people that were ordered to do things, but they know nothing. They were just following orders. We'd be very happy to invite Mr. Cox to give evidence, Collins said at the start of a committee hearing yesterday. However, we would still like to hear from Mr. Zuckerberg as well, the MP said. Well, good. Or actually, he's the chairman of the House of Commons there. We will seek to clarify with Facebook whether he is available to give evidence or not, because it wasn't clear from our correspondence. And if he is available to give evidence, then we would be happy to do that either in person or via video link if that would be more convenient for him. Yeah, in other words, Mark, it doesn't matter where you are. Sit in front of Skype or however you do it on Facebook now. And you can give some testimony that way. I don't think that you being away from a phone is going to matter, or a computer. Give me these people. Okay, so the committee's request to Facebook followed allegations that data from up to 50 million users was harvested by a British company, Cambridge Analytica, for use in election campaigns, namely that of U.S. President Donald Trump in 2016. The social media giant said it did not know the data was being used in a political campaign, although it did allow an academic researcher to create an app that picked up the information from users and their friends. Yeah, that's one way of putting it. In the letter, Stimson revealed that Facebook was working with regulators around the world to assess how many people in each country were affected, because I got to tell you, it's more than 50 million people 50 million people in the U.S. It's, according to Wiley, it could be several hundred million. And now we're talking about around the world. So she also said that we can now confirm that around 1% of the global downloads of the app came from users in the EU. And now the whole issue of Brexit is coming up with Cambridge Analytica, Facebook, et al. Offering here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, is an article out of Share Blue Media by Eric Boehlert. By making himself the point person of the House Republicans' cover-up of the Trump's Russia scandal, Representative Devin Nunes, Repug of California, has catapulted himself out of the political obscurity and into the limelight. He's also attracted a strong Democratic challenger who's raising a ton of money from grassroots supporters. Fresno, California prosecutor Andrew Jans is on pace to raise $1 million this quarter alone after banking $635,000 online in the month of February. Oh, I should add also any embellishments that are obviously are in this reporter's opinion. Okay? Just so we make that clear. Because Eric Boehlert wouldn't put in Repug of California. Okay? But I would, and I did. Okay. Nunes' district voted by Trump by 10 points, which would suggest his re-election is safe, but Pennsylvania's 18th district voted for Trump by 20 points, and Connor Lamb just got elected there. It seems no place is safe for Republicans in November, as more and more opt for retirement instead of facing voters again. This is a district we should not even be talking about. NBC News' Alex Seitz-Wald discussed the Nunes campaign on Monday. This should be off the map entirely. Yeah, it should, shouldn't it? But it's not off the map, and Trump's Russia woes are to blame. As the head of the House Intelligence Committee, Nunes was assigned to investigate Russia's attacks on the 2016 election and find out what the Trump campaign knew about it. Instead, Nunes has opted to run for interference. His name even became synonymous with an embarrassing attempt by Republicans to smear and malign the FBI in hopes of derailing Trump's Russia foes. We're talking about a very law and order, Blue Lives Matter district, by the way. Let's be clear. But there's also a lot of people, I mean, if you go in the district, there's a lot of Republicans that have no idea what he's doing, and they didn't even know that he was on the Russia Intelligence Committee. Oh, there's a Russia Intelligence Committee? I mean, I got to say, there's not a whole lot of civic education in that district, if most anywhere in the country now. But what really bothers the people in the district is that because he has taken such an interest on the national level, now this is a behavior that's endemic to chairmen and chairwomen, is that they stay in Washington so much doing this, and it's important work, that they forget their district and they never go home. And this has been Nunes's predicament, because he's only recently made any outreach in his own district that he performs or that he represents. And the reason he continues to get reelected is that he does come from a major dairy family in the region with extreme name recognition. And when and if people vote, they usually go, oh, yeah, Nunes. Okay, I know that guy. Or I've heard of him. Well, prior to the release of the so-called Nunes memo, the Department of Justice wrote a letter warning Nunes not to release the document without giving the DOJ and FBI time to review it, calling the move extraordinarily reckless. And none of that has gone unnoticed back in Fresno. His performance as chairman of the highly sensitive House Intelligence Committee has been nothing short of embarrassing, the Fresno Bee recently announced in a stinging editorial takedown of Nunes. They continued with their editorial. Instead of taking Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election seriously and leading an impartial and bipartisan inquiry, Nunes has colluded with the White House. So that's the Fresno Bee. Okay. There are just 14 remaining Republican House members of Congress from California out of the state's 53-person delegation. After November, the Republican number is expected to shrink even further. Because as I was taken to task, I assigned the Republican Party as the party of Nazis, wife beaters, child molesters, and bottom feeders. And I was taken to task that wasn't the case, but I think that people are realizing there's something going on with the Republican Party. It's almost like they've written contracts in Cyrillic. Up here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, is an article out of Yes Magazine by Lornette Turnbull. In Hartford, Vermont last year, U.S. Border Patrol agents boarded a Greyhound bus as it arrived from Boston, asking passengers about their citizenship and checking the IDs of people of color or those with accents. In January, they stopped a man in Indio, California, as he was boarding an Los Angeles-bound bus and questioning him about his immigration status. They told him that his shoes looked suspicious, like those of someone who had recently crossed the border. Let me just say, I've been in Indio, California. I've worked in Indio, California. I drilled water wells in Indio, California, and I lived on a grapefruit farm in Indio, California. And everybody's shoes look pretty damn dusty. It's in the goddamn desert. Jesus. Interrogation, searches, demands for identification, and possible detainment are processes people are subjected to as they try to enter the U.S. at ports of entry. As the U.S. Customs and Border Protection tries to keep borders secure, turns out this broad authority does not end at ports of entry, but extends for another 100 miles into the interior, across the entire perimeter of the country. It's an area some derisively refer to as the Constitution Free Zone. It is also home to 2/3 of the U.S. population. Within this area, U.S. Border Patrol, a division of Customs and Border Protection, has authority to board and search any vehicle, bus or vessel without a warrant, and can ask occupants to prove their legal status in their country. Papers, please. And then you hear the boot heels click. Some 200 million people live within this 100-mile zone, which encompasses most major U.S. cities, from east to west and north to south, including New York, Seattle, Detroit, and Philadelphia. The zone also includes the entirety of many states, Florida, Massachusetts, and New Jersey, for example. Yeah. Doesn't matter whether you're a U.S. citizen or not. They can stop your car, pull you over for any reason, and you have to prove that you are a U.S. citizen. Or something. This wide authority, which appears to conflict with constitutional rights, is contained in a statutory change to the Immigration and Nationality Act more than 70 years ago. Regulations later established the 100-mile zone. The ACLU and other constitutional scholars have long argued that the 100-mile zone violates Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable search and seizure, but the U.S. Supreme Court has consistently upheld it. Okay, well, law students from the ACLU-affiliated Gonzaga Center for Civil and Human Rights were handing out Know Your Rights flyers at Greyhound bus station in Spokane, Washington, where border agents routinely perform onboard checks and where 37 passengers were taken into custody last year. Because the Fifth Amendment grants passengers the right to remain silent, they are not legally obligated to answer officers' questions, although refusing to do so has always led to arrest. The ACLU realizes that refusing to answer is a tough call for most people, but believes that if more passengers, particularly U.S. citizens, asserted their right to remain silent, it would be easier for the most vulnerable among them to do the same. Statutory rules always put infringements upon our constitutional rights. Always. With a boot heel click and a stiff arm salute. And if we don't do that, well, they're going to take us away. And they do. All right, let's get to our break and we'll come back and we'll go through weather around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. The fossil record is far from being a complete library of everything that's ever lived.
The vast, vast majority of everything that's ever lived has completely decayed away, bones and all, even, for animals that have bones and shells. So fossilization is a very rare occurrence.
Duncan Murdoch, a research fellow at the Oxford University Museum of Natural History.
But then if you play the numbers game and think about how many organisms have lived, then fossilization is ultimately inevitable that some things will get into the fossil record.
But what parts of an organism fossilize, and in which stage of decomposition, can vary, meaning it can be hard to reconstruct a living animal from what's represented in rock. Plus, most of the fossil record is bones and teeth. To find any evidence of the soft tissue of ancient animals is incredibly rare. So to learn more about that process of decay and fossilization that can preserve soft tissue, Murdoch and his team dissect marine animals, like hagfish and lampreys, as they lie rotting in the lab. The study of how organisms become preserved is called taphonomy, and it can stink.
Yeah, it's certainly a very smelly place to work sometimes.
Smelly, but it gives them a step-by-step look at how creatures' bodies change as they decay.
The first signs that the animal is decaying is the very softest tissues like the guts and the eyes start to decay away, and then fine structures like the gills, and then things like the fins start to fall off, and you start to see the skin falling apart. And then eventually all that you're left with are some little bits of cartilage and then remnants of the muscle blocks.
They break down their work in the journal Paleontology and make the case for why rotting flesh may give a fresh look at the fossil record. Because what you don't find, and the degraded state of the material you do find, have their own stories to tell about the history of life on Earth. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. One method of constitutional interpretation is to examine the intention the framers of the Constitution had when writing the document. This method is often called original intent or original history. It is based on the idea that the Constitution by itself does not always have an obvious meaning. Therefore, we should look at the intentions of the people who wrote it. Those who believe in this method say that the justices should base their decisions on how the framers would have decided. They claim that it is the approach most faithful to the ideas in the Constitution. The problem is that it is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to figure out what the framers intended on some issues. There were differences of opinion among the 39 framers. How can you determine who had the correct view? This method of interpretation also gives no guidelines about types of situations that did not exist when the Constitution was written. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
Testifying by police. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. A stubborn problem, the recent New York Times headline continued, and then the subhead, police lying persists even amid an explosion of video evidence that has allowed the public to test officers' credibility. Examples in the article. An officer accuses a driver of recklessly crossing the double yellow line, which it turns out the road doesn't have at all. And an officer claims that a man came at him with clenched fists, but that never occurred. And an officer claims to have witnessed an arrest when the evidence shows he wasn't even there. The article quotes one officer who said, quote, behind closed doors, we call it testifying. Sometimes to solve a crime that they couldn't solve, sometimes to justify an unconstitutional search and seizure, sometimes to simply send someone to prison. Police officials in New York have expressed optimism that cell phone cameras, which are everywhere, would reduce police lying, but it turns out maybe it really hasn't. Because as a 10-year Brooklyn officer admitted, there's no real fear of being caught. You're not going to trial. No one's going to be cross-examined, which it turns out is the truth. Maybe 1% of cases actually go to a jury trial or have a motion to suppress. So the odds of an officer being called to account, they're tiny. As the article concludes, quote, video seems to be more capable of exposing lies than in vanquishing them. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1915. That was the day British socialist illustrator Walter Crane died. You have probably seen his Art Nouveau style illustrations. Many celebrate International May Day, memorialize the Haymarket Martyrs of Chicago, or commemorate the Paris Commune. He also published a series of illustrations titled Cartoons for the Cause. That series was produced to commemorate the International Socialist Trade Union Congress of 1896. Born in 1845, Crane apprenticed with the Chartist radical William James Linton. He started his career illustrating children's books, nursery rhymes, and fairy tales. He later traveled to Italy with his wife Mary to continue with book illustrations and portraiture. Upon his return to Britain, he became friends with artist William Morris, whose pamphlet, Art and Socialism, deeply impacted him. Crane soon joined the Art Workers Guild and the Arts and Crafts Society. Together, he and Morris joined the Social Democratic Federation. Crane produced illustrations for its journal, Justice. From there, he helped to found the Socialist League and illustrated its journal, The Commonwealth. When the League failed to gain popularity, he moved on to the Fabian Society, whose members included George Bernard Shaw, H.G. Wells, and Sidney and Beatrice Webb. Crane produced wildly popular images like the Angel of Freedom and published The Claims of Decorative Art. In it, he asserted art could not flourish in a world where wealth was so unfairly distributed. Only under socialism could use and beauty be united. He continued to publish and became principal of the Royal College of Arts in 1898. A strong critic of the British Empire, Crane supported the Labour Party and produced posters each year to celebrate May Day. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Today's corporate captains like to think of themselves not as mere business people, but as modern society's innovative geniuses. But innovation for what purpose? After all, some of society's most inventive minds are flim-flammers, Ponzi schemers, gamers, embezzlers, thieves. Sure enough, too much innovation coming out of corporate suites these days amounts to shameless schemes to dupe and rip off rank-and-file workers. The latest one is a hustle called gamification, an attempt by such giants as T-Mobile and Walt Disney to give game-like, quote, psychological prizes to employees, rather than giving pay raises or cash bonuses. As the honchos of United Airlines learned, however, not everyone bites the corporate bait. United recently announced a new fun game for employees. Rather than giving standard bonus payments this year, bosses were creating a dazzling sweepstakes lottery with such wow prizes as luxury cars and $100,000 in cash. But the sizzle quickly fizzled, as United's 90,000 workers realized that more than 99% of them would get zero. United had hoped the game would create, quote, excitement among the rank and file, but instead it created resentment. Workers, naturally preferring bonus cash to bogus corporate excitement, rebelled with such fury that United is now reconsidering the switch. That case aside, however, the corporate push to replace real pay with cheap psychic income is on the rise. More corporations are even hiring chief behavioral officers to analyze reams of personal data on employees to devise non-cash ways to motivate them. This is Jim Hightower saying, what we have here is the deterioration of executive ethics to the point that openly gaming and cheating America's workaday majority is considered fair play.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. The U.S. has expelled some 60 Russian diplomats from American soil as a part of a coordinated effort by America's allies to punish Moscow for its alleged involvement in the poisoning of a former Russian spy in the U.K. last month. Joining the U.S. in expelling Russian personnel on Monday were Ukraine, Germany, France, Poland, Canada, Denmark, the Netherlands, Italy, Romania, and Finland. The U.S. took the further step on Monday of ordering Russia's consulate in Seattle be closed down, citing national security concerns given the facility's close proximity to a U.S. naval base and the headquarters of airplane manufacturer Boeing. Trump's UN ambassador Nikki Haley said expelling 12 Russian operatives from the country's mission to the UN was a wise move that shows Russia's actions have consequences. Haley went on to say that, quote, Russia uses the United Nations as a safe haven for dangerous activities within our borders. And rumors are swirling in Beijing that North Korean Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un may be in the country on an unannounced diplomatic visit. China watchers began noticing cascading train delays Monday morning in northeastern China near the North Korean border. Hours later, an armored train similar to one used by Kim Jong-un's father on a 2011 trip to Beijing was spotted in the Chinese capital. Kim Jong-un has never left his home country during his 6 years as supreme leader, though he was educated at a boarding school in Switzerland as a teenager. North Korea has thus far yet to weigh in on a possible direct meeting with President Trump after Trump accepted an invitation for direct talks last month. North Korean diplomats have, however, made trips to Sweden to discuss logistics of a possible summit, and Russian media reports that North Korea's foreign minister will head to Moscow in early April. Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and just a reminder, our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So let's begin with weather from around the world, and we always begin along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is 30 degrees Fahrenheit. We are forecast to be a tad warmer than yesterday. We'll be getting up to around 66. And it looks like we'll have a steady climb into the low 70s here for a week or so. And overnight lows will be creeping into the low to mid 40s. So maybe we will be having spring. I don't know. I'd still like to have a little bit more rain, maybe without the freezing temperatures. Okay, so winds are right now out of the southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. They'll be changing to the north-northwest from out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles an hour later on. And then they'll be returning, they will then be out of the west tonight at 5 to 10 miles per hour. So obviously gusts will be more than that. No data still on air quality. How dare you? Pressure is rising at 30.45 inches. Visibility is around 8 miles, and humidity is 89%. So there's still a little bit of moisture out in the air. And, it's frozen. So we have a little crusty crust out there on the lawn. How nice. Okay, weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people live around the world. London is 58, mostly cloudy. Paris is 54 and cloudy. Rome, 60 and fair. Kiev, 45 and fair. Kabul, 63. Fair, but with wind. Hong Kong is 66 and clear. Tokyo is 58 and fair. Sydney, Australia, 67 and fair. San Francisco, California, 51 degrees and sunny. And New York is 40 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people live around the world. First offering here at the chef's table of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays is Out of Think Progress by Ian Millhiser. A new report by the Brennan Center for Justice suggests that congressional races are so heavily rigged in favor of Republicans that the United States can barely be described as a democratic republic. The upshot of their analysis is that to win a bare majority of the seats in the U.S. House, Democrats would likely have to win the national popular vote by nearly 11 points. 11 points. To put that number in perspective, neither party achieved an 11-point popular vote win in the last several decades. The last time this happened, according to the Brennan Center, was 1982, when a deep recession led the opposition Democrats to a 269-seat majority against President Reagan's Republicans. The Brennan Center's estimate, it should be noted, is unusually pessimistic for Democrats, but consistent with a number of estimates showing that Democrats face an unfair disadvantage at the polls. After the 2012 election, when Democratic House candidates won the popular vote by almost 1.5 million votes, but Republicans won a solid majority in the House, Think Progress estimated that Democrats would need to win the popular vote by about 7.25 points in order to take back the House. Democratic prospects have improved since 2012 in large part due to a court decision striking down Pennsylvania's aggressively and illegal gerrymandered maps. Similarly, data journalist Nate Silver estimates that Democrats could need to win by as much as 10 points to take back the House. One factor that contributes to the Brennan Center's pessimism is its analysis of congressional maps in red states. In Alabama, for example, Democratic House candidates could win as much as 47% of the statewide popular vote and still win only one of the state's 7 House seats. In Georgia, Democrats could win 54% of the popular vote, yet only win 5 of the state's 14 seats. Nor is the House the only place where American democracy is breaking down. Donald Trump lost the popular vote by nearly 3 million votes, yet he still got to be president. The 49 senators in the Democratic caucus represent nearly 40 million more people than the 51 senators in the Republican caucus. And this last problem is likely to get much worse. According to Burrish College's David Birdsell, by 2040, about 70% of Americans are expected to live in the 15 largest states. As a result, 70% of Americans will have only 30 senators representing them, while the remaining 30% of Americans will have 70 senators representing them. Moreover, if the parties continue to sort into diverse urban Democrats and homogenous, more rural Republicans, the GOP won't just gain a lock on the Senate, they could potentially ensure that no Democrat is ever confirmed to the federal bench again. And that is a feature, folks, not a bug. This is exactly what the Heritage Foundation, the Federalist Society, Peterson, who just died here, the Kochs, the Mercers, etc., have been doing for the last several decades, dismantling and destroying democracy as we know it. In 2016, when Senate Republicans successfully blocked Chief Judge Merrick Garland's nomination to the Supreme Court, the 46 Democrats in the Senate represented 20 million more people than the 54 Republicans. In 2017, when Neil Gorsuch was confirmed to occupy that seat, the 45 senators who opposed his confirmation represented more than 25 million more people than the senators who supported him. The United States, in other words, is barreling toward a future where a younger, multicultural, more urbanized majority is ruled by an aging white rural minority. That's a recipe for civil unrest, or even a secession crisis. At the very least, it casts a very dark cloud of illegitimacy over the entire United States government.
Dansez maintenant sous l'été, les pieds nus dans le sable. Dansez maintenant et jetez vos ennuis dans les vagues qui dansent.
Finishing up here at the chef's table in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is an article out of Think Progress, this time by Casey Michael. Who would allegedly threaten Stormy Daniels and her infant daughter? Daniels, an adult film actress who says she had an affair with Trump in 2006, said in an interview with 60 Minutes on Sunday night that an unknown man threatened her not to reveal any information about Trump. I don't know, could it have been Keith Schiller? That's who I was guessing, but you would think that she would recognize him. Daniels said she was threatened in 2011, the same time she had been in discussion with In Touch magazine about revealing details of the alleged affair. A guy walked up on me and said to me, "Leave Trump alone, forget the story," Daniels recalled, and then he leaned around and looked at my daughter and said, "That's a beautiful little girl. It'd be a shame if something happened to her mom," and then he was gone. Daniels does not know the name of the man who threatened her, but said she would be able to recognize him right away. And as Daniels' lawyer, Michael Avenatti, said, he has no doubt that Trump's lawyer, Michael Cohen, or one of Trump's close associates, were behind the threat. You mean a close associate like Keith Schiller? He's like about, 6'6" or something? Kind of thin, but rangy. He's rangy, yeah. Trump thus far has refrained from directly commenting on the matter. On Monday, Deputy Press Secretary Raj Shah said Trump doesn't believe that any of the claims that Ms. Daniels made last night at the interview are accurate, including the claims of a threat. Well, of course, he never admits to anything because people who admit to the actual truth are losers. But Trump may not be in any position to judge Daniels' accuracy, especially given his well-documented ties to organized crime figures and the use of similar strong-arm intimidation tactics in the past. Indeed, no president, or presidential candidate for that matter, had as extensive a history of ties to mobsters and mafiosi as Trump. As New York Magazine's Jonathan Chait wrote, Trump's mafia connections are the sort of scandal that would have killed an ordinary candidacy but barely even register on the outside scale of Trump's scandals. And when I say that the Republicans are the party of Nazis, child molesters, wife beaters, and mobsters, I'm not kidding. If they give sucre to it, if they're just so consumed with holding power and getting more money, what are they? Mobsters. While much of it has been buried under a growing pile of scandals and controversy, revisiting the links between Trump and the mob, both domestic and foreign, shows what kind of illicit friends he kept close. One journalist, Pulitzer Prize winner David K. Johnston, spent the past 3 decades cataloging Trump's seedy ties throughout his years as a developer in New York and New Jersey. In 2016, before Trump's election, Johnston provided a tour de force introduction of Trump's ties to the dons and lieutenants of the New York Mafia. Trump hired mobbed-up firms to erect Trump Tower in his Trump Plaza apartment building in Manhattan, including buying overpriced concrete from a company controlled by Mafia chieftains Anthony Fat Tony Salerno and Paul Castellano. And it wasn't just business either. Trump also probably met personally with Salerno at the townhouse of notorious New York fixer Roy Cohn, because Roy Cohn was Trump's mentor and personal lawyer. Trump also routinely worked with individuals connected to the mob in Atlantic City. One of his associates, court records revealed, let's be clear here, was in turn an associate of the Scarfo crime organization, serving as a financier of mob activities in South Jersey and Philadelphia. Nor, of course, was it only the American crime networks in close proximity to Trump. From Azerbaijan to Iran to Russia, Trump's dealings and his properties themselves often played key roles in money laundering for organized crime and drug cartels. Is it any wonder why he doesn't want his taxes released? I suppose it doesn't matter because Mueller already has them. All told, no other candidate, David K. Johnston found, for the White House in 2016 had anything close to Trump's record of repeated social and business dealings with mobsters, swindlers, and crooks. Trump's mob ties were so extensive and so concerning that Australia eventually barred Trump from opening a hotel and casino in the country. As authorities wrote, Atlantic City would be a dubious model for Sydney, and in our judgment, the Trump Mafia connection should exclude Trump from any consideration, the Australian government said. Well, that didn't prevent Trump from winning the presidency, of course, and from suddenly seeing accusations that his inner circle played a role in threatening the safety of a young mother and her child recently come to the fore. If anything, Trump's presidency has only served as another introduction to the tactics employed by Trump himself and the business from which he refuses to divest. Look at everything that's played out at Trump's former property in Panama over the past 2 months, for instance. After the majority owner of the building attempted to terminate the Trump Organization as a property manager, Trump Organization security staff decided to scuffle with the property's actual security staff, going so far as to grab one of the non-Trump employees by the neck to wrestle them to the ground. All this while they blocked the majority owner from his property units. A few weeks later, a Panamanian judge who had ruled against the Trump Organization said Trump lawyers paid her a visit, leaving her intimidated and threatened. It's unclear whether Trump has any plans to comment or tweet directly about it. Of course he won't. Now, there's a great documentary about the people in Scotland trying to prevent that golf course from being built. And there's long documented evidence of the strong-arm tactics bordering on mafiosi tactics that he used there. But I guess, if you elect a mobster, you're going to get a mobster. And apparently 70-some thousand people in 3 states thought that was so important that they had to. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for today, but we will be back tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. And David will be back live in his own studio and giving you a live report about the events of the day, as we will tomorrow as well. So stay tuned to Netroots Radio throughout the rest of the day. Breaking news as it happens. I'll remind folks that if and when Mueller gets fired, Netroots Radio will break in and give live commentary and analyses of that terrible affront to our democracy. But otherwise, stay tuned to Netroots Radio, and we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.